Actually, Betty joins us right now with some updated information.
Yeah, it looks like we are about to see landfall with this storm. The eye wall just moving north of Marco Island. So the exact center of the storm, once that crosses the landmass, we consider this landfall, and it looks like it's right about there. So I would say within the next 5-10 minutes, we do have official report from the National Weather Service that Irma has made a second landfall, made landfall in the Keys about 9 o'clock this morning. And from there, the eye wall heading up towards Bonita Springs and continuing there, moving into the Tampa Bay area. Weakening as it does. So this landfall is helping weaken this before it reaches the Tampa Bay area. A couple of days ago, we were very concerned that this was going to take a little bit more of a westerly track and it would not weaken significantly before reaching the Tampa Bay area and possibly hitting as a Category 3 hurricane. I think the intensity will come down, and the official word from the National Weather Service, a new official track, that'll come down at 5 o'clock, and I expect to see a significantly weaker storm now that that center has made landfall. Still, out ahead of it, we sort of saw those outer bands move through earlier today. Now we're starting to see those ones closer to the center of the storm moving through. And at that point, it's not going to stop raining for a good long while. So already from about Manatee County southward, we're seeing that. This is going to push upward into the Tampa Bay area over the next hour or so. And from there, we are going to be looking at a lot of rain being an issue, not a Harvey issue. Our more pressing issue is going to be winds with this one. And that's still, even if this weakens, we're looking at 70, 80 miles per hour with winds and some gusts up around 90, possibly as much as 100 for some of our southern counties. So we're going to continue to monitor it, but it is, we're cautiously optimistic that we will get a much weaker storm than what we were anticipating yesterday, especially now that that track has shifted just a little bit farther to the east and we get that landfall in there. By the time it works its way up to the Bay Area, things should be calmer, of course it's relative, than what we could have seen had this stayed just a little bit to the west, and that also would have meant a significantly higher storm surge threat. As it stands, there will be some spots where we could pick up 7 to 9 feet of that. Isolated higher amounts could be as much as 10, but that covers evacuation zone A. That's why that mandatory evacuation was issued, to get you out of the way of all this. I'm getting a lot of requests to time this out. Starting around 5 p.m., it is possible in Sarasota, Manatee counties to start seeing hurricane force winds, certainly tropical storm force winds pretty much across the board by that point. That's possible into Tampa, St. Pete as we head into about 7 o'clock tonight, and then a little bit later around midnight for places like Brooksville, up into Pasco, Hernando, Citrus counties. And that wind field is going to spread to the north over the next few hours. I think this is a little premature in terms of the timing, because this does have some wind speeds picking up pretty rapidly and not too distant future from now. This is probably closer to what it's going to look like come 5 o'clock. We start seeing those 70, 75 mile per hour wind gusts, and then those spread to the north towards Tampa Bay. Again, around 7 p.m. That would likely be when we start to see that, and continuing until about 3 o'clock in the morning. I know it's going to be a late night for many of us, but we are right here with you, and we're going to continue to update you on whatever this storm does. Hopefully it becomes a much weaker storm as it continues to move off to the north, and then as the center comes over, you get a little bit of a break. But then remember, there's the shift in winds on the backside of this, and that's where our storm surge threat increases once again, especially for the Hillsborough side of Tampa Bay, and then up into the Nature Coast from there. So don't let your guard down when that initial eye moves over. Want to give you that heads up. There's going to be a second round coming about an hour to an hour and a half after we get those strongest winds, and then we'll see that coming around the backside of this system as well. Still expecting this thing to bobble right up along the coastline there, and we're going to continue to watch it as it does. The tornado threat really starting to wind down. Can't still rule out that isolated possibility there, but our big focus now should really be the winds and the heavy rain in addition to the storm surge. So if there's kind of 4 threats with this, there's one of them we can kind of take off the table at this point. But don't let your guard down entirely, because we still have a big night ahead of us over the next few hours. Reggie and Allison, those winds really start to pick up.
And you know, when you talk about winds, we've talked about that and the fact that we are going to lose power. Right now, more than 2.1 million people in Florida at this point are without power. 845,000 of those people are in Miami-Dade alone. and we're just starting to see this.
This is live pictures from Naples right now. You can see the winds and the gusts. I mean, this thing is making landfall near Marco Island. Ashley, look at this video. What do you think? 50, 70 mile per hour gusts there?
Naples area?
In the neighborhood of 60. Those trees are really
It's really
swaying
stiff.
there.
Yeah, really stiff. Heavy, you can see the rainfall coming in. That's associated with it. The bands are moving through. But, I mean, there is a tad bit, a shred of good news out of this. I mean, the lowering of the threats of possible tornadoes.
That is some good news.
We can't get rid of that totally, but lowering that. With that eye somewhat disintegrating just a tad bit might lessen and weaken the power. So, you know what? We're still going to stay very vigilant on top of this. This is still a big, tough storm.
We just got a 10 News alert. If you have the 10 News app, you probably just got this alert to your phone that we sent out that the center of Hurricane Irma made landfall at Marco Island. So we are just getting that as a 10 News alert.
Yeah.
So Ashley, if your mic is up and you can just talk about that with this video, we talked about the fact that once it makes landfall, we could see that kind of weaken it slightly as we move forward.
Sure, as it continues to move over land, and here's where it made landfall, if we want to pop up weather one at some point, right there over Marco Island. So the strongest winds with this are always going to be in the eye wall, and that's this batch. I'll pause this for you so I can kind of draw right in here. So that's where we're going to see the strongest, most dangerous winds with this. Now that the center has come ashore, it's going to be slightly cut off from its supply of warm, moist air and water. Those are the two things that fuel these hurricanes. They cannot survive without it. So as it moves over land, it is going to weaken. Now, because this thing is so huge, it's built up quite a supply of this warm air and moisture just all by itself. So it is by no means going to suddenly just fall apart.
No.
Right.
We've got several hours to deal with the impacts of this storm, but what it will do is help to mitigate it just a little bit, maybe kind of take the edge off, so to speak, and drop those winds a little bit. And the longer it stays over land, the weaker the storm is going to be by the time it reaches us. So at this point, we kind of have to watch. Does it continue due north, or does it do like what it did in Cuba and kind of bounce a little bit? It can kind of skirt and bobble, and if it goes back over water, it'll re-strengthen a little bit again. So at this point, it's kind of watching over the next hour, hour and a half, and kind of seeing if it stays on that northerly trajectory. And if it does, then it is going to be likely even a weaker storm than what we were forecasting this morning. And we would be able to maybe drop the wind speeds just a little bit. Not significantly. We're still talking about hurricane force winds in the Tampa Bay area, but they would be slightly lighter, and instead of maybe, you know, seeing more 90 mile per hour gusts, we would be talking more about 80 to 85. So weakening it a little bit. But when you talk about how massive these storms are, if you weaken those winds across the board, you actually will notice a bit of help there, all things considered. Now, another thing that we're going to see, once these storms make landfall, their wind field tends to spread out. So it's very likely, if we're seeing hurricane force winds right now 50 miles from the center, that's going to go 60 or 70 as that sort of fans out. That's a pretty typical thing for these landfalling hurricanes to do. And right around the center, there is going to be the possibility of getting some of these tornadoes with it. But that's well south of us, so that's not necessarily a threat much longer for the Tampa Bay area. Still an isolated possibility embedded within one of these bands, but it tends to be more often those outer bands on the northeast side. That's why we saw so much activity along the east coast of Florida earlier today, and now we're starting to back off on that just a little bit. It's with bands more like this that we see that, and now those are starting to pull north of the Tampa Bay area. Again, that threat for tornadoes is dropping off slightly, not zero yet. We're not out of the woods in terms of that, but it's becoming a less of a priority, where it was definitely higher on the list earlier on this afternoon. Now we've got to worry about some pretty torrential rain, and of course those wind speeds that are gradually going to be increasing over the next few hours, and in some spots already looking at tropical storm force winds, especially south of Tampa Bay. And then I'll go ahead and show you what our current winds are doing. Notice as we get into Sarasota County, over 40 mile per hour gusts, and those winds are going to keep right on picking up from there. So kind of pay attention to the color scheme more so than the numbers, because we are losing some reporting sites here. Notice Wauchula, Sebring, Venice not reporting anything. Maybe that those wind gusts are too strong, or they've been taken offline for some particular reason, likely due to winds or some sort of damage there. So we're going to see these numbers coming up as we head through the next couple of hours. And St. Pete, we've got a lot of our reporters out there. In fact, I think Noah was out there not too long ago, kind of having almost trouble standing upright for a period of time. And here's why. Starting to see those wind gusts approaching 50 miles per hour. And again, these winds are going to continue to strengthen as the center of the storm moves closer to the Tampa Bay area. So we're going to continue to watch that. That purple field is going to continue to spread north as we head through the next couple of hours. Now, this particular model, I think, is a little too quick with how much we ramp these up, but the numbers will likely pan out just a couple hours later than what it's forecasting, and still expect the strongest winds right around the center of this storm. And we're looking toward later in the day for that. Want to switch you over to a live shot of what's going on. This is in Naples right now, so near Marco Island, just a little bit to the north and west, and boy, are those winds picking up there. You can see those palm trees swaying, that flag there. Looks, I don't know, just guessing off the top of my head, I'd say we're talking 60 to 70 mile per hour wind gusts in there. And we're going to continue again in this area to see the strongest winds actually move through there in the next hour or two, now that we've seen that landfall near Marco Island, kind of Naples, up in that area too. And then from there, is it ripped? Yeah, I was wondering, yeah.
There is a gust. There it is.
There it is. Wow, just amazing to see.
Now, we're not seeing a lot of rain in this video.
No, at times it will taper off. It's going to come kind of in rounds. It may be a little, calm right now, and then you just see torrential rain coming up in the next 10 or 15 minutes. It's pretty common. The overall trend is going to get rainier for us as we head through the rest of the afternoon, but it's not going to necessarily be nonstop, and especially once you get in the center of the storm, well, then we start seeing things actually clearing out. Sometimes you can even see a little bit of blue sky. Marco Island is where we're looking at this from, and just look at those winds right there.
And that's what we were talking about, the rain. You didn't see that in that video from Naples, but you're seeing it in this video.
It's coming down there, so that's actually likely within the eye wall where we're seeing some of the strongest storms there. And just look at those sheets of rain just coming across there. So we've got the downpours there. We've got these incredible winds. I'm always kind of amazed by the resiliency of some of these trees around here. It's like, how are these not getting picked up and blown away looking at that? They're built to last, that's for sure.
Now, it made landfall at Marco Island, and we're seeing all of this. You talk a lot about how when the eye comes onto land and it's a little bit calmer. So if this is what it is like in Marco Island, talk about what it is in areas that maybe are around that.
So this is actually in the eye wall, what we're looking at right here. And the eye wall immediately surrounds the center of that storm, and that's where we get some of the strongest winds and rain from this. I'm looking at that and I'm thinking 80, 90 mile per hour winds with that. And in just a few minutes, it might be really calm right here for what we're seeing. It takes about 10 minutes for things to kind of die down after that eye wall moves through, and then for an hour or so. Again, sometimes when you get these really potent storms that are really well stacked and still really going, you may look up and see blue sky. You'll get some of those fair weather cumulus clouds, but there'll be blue sky in there, and then just a little bit later, you come around and you just get the vicious winds on the backside of this.
Actually, tell folks about the time frame that something like this episode will last. 10, 15 minutes, 45 minutes, because this is near the eye wall.
Right. It really does depend on how big the storm is and how fast the storm is moving. But in this case, it's not very long. It's moving at a fairly good pace. It's not something that's stalled right over the area. And we know that it's moving, at about 8 to 10 miles per hour. So if we just start kind of measuring this outer eye wall, we're talking about an hour during the really intense activity, and then we'll get about an hour to an hour and a half maybe where it's really, really calm after we kind of get through the worst of that batch.
Speaking of calm, take a look at Miami.
At Miami, look at that.
I mean, it took a beating, and look, it appears look at the trees. It appears to be very calm down there.
Well, definitely seeing some breezy conditions, and there's our down tree. So there is going to be some of that, and we're going to be seeing similar conditions once we get through this in the Tampa Bay area. There are going to be a lot of branches, limbs, things like that down, and of course we know that those can take out power lines, and we're already starting to see some outages reported.
845,000 people just in Miami-Dade without power right now.
That's incredible. And remember, we were talking a couple of days ago about how likely we were thinking Miami was going to get hit head on by this storm. And it shifted to the whole other side of the state, and look at the damage that we're seeing out of Miami. This is an incredibly large storm, and it's actually shrunk a little bit since yesterday, but we're still talking about something that's 400 miles across, which is over twice the width of Florida. That's why we're seeing such significant impacts. We're not talking about a really compact storm that's going to really impact one side or the other, or impact the Panhandle, but not so much the peninsula. This is going to be an event that all of us in Florida are riding out together. And here's the latest scan of that eye. Again, just came over Marco Island within the last few minutes. From there, it's going to continue north toward Bonita Springs. They're going to see the winds from this eye wall, and then it's going to progressively move back toward the north. And again, we've got to kind of wait and see, is this going to continue due north, or is it going to bobble a little bit back offshore? Sometimes it can do that. It gets that friction, but in this case, it may actually weaken it and push it a little bit farther to the east. So it looks like the odds are good that we're going to see this stay over land for a good while before actually working its way towards Sarasota, Manatee counties, and then from there over the Tampa Bay area, but still looking at a significant storm. Even if this thing stays over land the entire time between here and there, we are talking about a hurricane hitting Tampa Bay later on tonight, but we're going to continue to track this for you. We're going to bring you the latest information. We're going to give you that heads up. When are you going to be dealing with the intense winds in this eye wall? We're not going to leave you hanging there. We're going to bring you up to date with the very latest, so you know when you may hear the scariest sounds outside, and you can be prepared for that, rather than just suddenly out of nowhere, oh my gosh, what's that horrible sound outside? We want to give you all the information you need to get through the storm right along with us.